All right, folks. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the City Council meeting. It is Monday, December 9th, 2024, 6 o'clock, 6:01. And as Director Benarott mentioned, we're handling these meetings that involve public hearings or meetings of the City Council on a hybrid sort of basis. So folks will be able to watch online on cable TV or on YouTube.com or Edina TV. And so they may want to call in for this public hearing that we're going to have with respect to the proposed reconstruction of streets in the President's neighborhood. And so we'll let them call in, but we'll take testimony from our residents that are here this evening first. But before we get there, we're going to then call the meeting to order, and I'll do that now, and ask our clerk, Sharon Allison, to call the roll.
Councilmember Agnew.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Risser.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. Next, folks, is the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We've got a form of meeting agenda in front of us this evening. Does anyone on staff or council wish to modify the agenda in any form? All right. Is there a motion to adopt the meeting agenda as published?
So moved.
Second.
Member Pierce moves. Member Jackson seconds the adoption of the meeting agenda as published. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the meeting agenda as published, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The meeting agenda is adopted. We are going to have a singular public hearing this evening. Folks, this is the time of the year when we talk about street reconstruction projects. And we've got about roughly, and Director Milner is going to talk about this from a backgrounding standpoint, we've got about roughly half the streets in town redone, 60 to 70-year-old streets that are just in a state of repair where we need to have a methodical way of going about replacing them. He's going to talk about how we do that neighborhood by neighborhood, what sort of test we use to determine where to go next, what we're trying to accomplish here, and why we're trying to accomplish it, so that we all take care of what we own together. We've changed the methodology that we use for street reconstruction assessments over time. You're going to be the beneficiary of that. He's going to talk about that changing methodology a little bit, where we switched from several years ago where we charged everybody for the roadway reconstruction, everything under the street being paid for by all of us together, as well as curb and gutter, but he'll explain that in a little bit more detail as we go into the process and talk about where we are on that sort of amortization schedule of slowly incorporating the cost of doing special assessments or street reconstruction into the general fund. But we're still in that process where we're converting over on this 16-year cycle. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And I'm sure you're all interested in knowing why your neighborhood, why now. And so we're pleased that you're all here to offer us up your thoughts and to listen to Director Milner in his presentation to understand what we're trying to accomplish in our town, and with your neighborhood being proposed as being the next place that we improve the streets and everything that's under the streets. So Director Milner, I'll turn to you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Yeah, we're here tonight to talk about the 2025 street reconstruction program. I won't be doing the majority of the conversation or the presentation here this evening. We have Andrew Scipione, our transportation planner, is going to talk about the bike and ped master plan. Aaron Ditzler, assistant city engineer, is really going to get into the utilities and the roads and the costs and those special assessments, Mayor, that you mentioned. And then Andy Lewis is with us from the Transportation Commission to give a point of view from the Commission's point of view. And like the Mayor said, we're here to talk about the President's Neighborhood project for 2025. First, I want to thank you, the council and staff, for being here tonight. We do this special meeting. It's another meeting on your agenda in December every year, and you're willing to do that for us. It's great. And then we also want to welcome the residents that are here this evening to participate either in person or over the phone, and the residents have already participated online at our meetings or Better Together website. So we're going to talk about infrastructure replacement, talk about that multimodal information, and then really focus on the President's A and B neighborhood. So this really ties back to the budget work plan, right? Pillar number one that you guys see and developed was the strong foundation. We want to make sure our infrastructure meets the community needs now and into the future. And we're going to do that from a whole host of different methods. The multimodal transportation network, our roads and sidewalks and bike facilities. We want to provide clean and safe drinking water with our distribution systems, but also for fire protection, sanitation with the sanitary sewer, and flood protection with storm sewer pipes, lakes, and ponds. One of the major things we look at is the pavement condition index, and this is the citywide average. And you can see this graph is 2010 on the left-hand side to 2024. This is a number that we rate the condition, and you'll hear this a little bit more for the neighborhood, but it's on a scale of 0 to 100, with 100 being a new pavement. And you can see we've adjusted our proactive pavement maintenance program over the years, and we're slowly ratcheting up being in that good as a city average. And I think that's where we want to be with our city pavements. And this program that we're going to talk about tonight is really a key to that part of it. But also is the mill and overlay program and our other maintenance operations. So we could put little influxes of money in, and that's what this is showing, is pavement conditions on the left-hand side, goods at the top, seriously failed on the bottom, and then the pavement age. And with our proactive maintenance, we want to get the longest amount of time out of these new pavements that we put in the street. And we do that with various overlays, with reclamite products and sealing cracks and stuff like that. So if we can input money at the right time, we can really extend the pavement life. It's not only pavement we're talking about tonight, it's all the underground utilities, and many people don't know all the different pipes and systems that are under our streets that provide the water for you when you turn on your faucets, but also where's that wastewater go. So there's water and storm sewer and sanitary systems, water storage tanks, wells that pull up raw water, and then our water treatment plants to provide that clean, safe drinking water. This was a slide we put together. Ross Bittner helped put this together on a kind of an asset management thing, and this goes directly to your conversations last week on the budget. You can see in the 50s and 60s there was a huge wave of infrastructure, streets, utilities, park shelter buildings, all the stuff, a lot of the stuff in town. And then we had this kind of second cycle. We call that the build-out. It's the first cycle, infrastructure dividends. We didn't have to do a lot in those 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Now it's really that commitment to reinvest in our infrastructure. And what we want to do from an engineering and public works side is flatten that curve out so we can have a nice steady stream, a nice steady budget every year to flatten that out. So this is our first infrastructure cycle. And as we have more and more of them, we feel we can really flatten out those expenditures over time to be consistent moving forward. Tonight we're going to talk about Presidents A and B. It's all local streets. There's no municipal state aid streets at all. It's right on the border of Hopkins. We'll talk a little bit about some shared streets in this neighborhood. And there's 301 properties. And like the mayor said, why my street? We group streets together in neighborhoods. It helps with the economies of scale when we go out for bid, because a contractor can work in one area over that summer. And it really helps us extend that pavement life when we do it all together, because when we come back for those other operations, maintenance operations, we can just do the whole mill and overlay within that neighborhood or other operations. And this is all part of that proactive pavement management program that I talked about to extend the life of the pavement and keep that average pavement condition index high in town. But it's not only the pavement. Again, it's based on pavement, but it's also underground utility information. And then the bike and ped system needs and gaps within the city, because that's another master plan that we're trying to identify and apply to these projects. So with that, I'll hand it over to Andrew Scipione, and he'll get into more of the bike and ped master plan.
Thank you, Director Miller. Welcome, Mr. Scipione.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. These projects provide us with a very rare opportunity to make pretty significant changes in our city. So whenever we're scoping out these projects, we start by looking at our guiding documents. Those include the comprehensive plan, our race and equity plan, climate action, living streets, the ped and bike master plan, and our active routes to school plan. We also work to incorporate our budget pillars, strong foundation, as Director Milner mentioned, reliable service, livable city, and better together. There are many different objectives that are mentioned in these plans, but kind of 4 overarching ones that relate specifically to this project include providing connectivity for everyday uses, schools, parks, transit, places of employment, meeting the needs of all users and abilities, so that includes our vulnerable users, pedestrians, cyclists, transit users, and motorists. Encouraging alternative transportation by providing pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure and encouraging transit use, which reduces congestion on our local streets and emissions in our neighborhoods, as well as improving safety and comfort by providing facilities that are separated from motor vehicle traffic. So in more detail tonight, you'll hear about components of this project that include narrowing streets, removing on-street parking, reallocating right-of-way for sidewalks and shared use paths, as well as replacing signage and pavement markings. All of these improvements are tailored to meet these objectives within these plans. If we're serious about meeting the objectives of all these plans, these are the types of improvements that we need to make. And with that, I will hand it over to Assistant City Engineer Aaron Ditzler to talk more specifically about this project.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cipriani. Mr. Dissler, welcome.
Thank you much. And thank you, Andrew, for highlighting some of our pedestrian and bicycle goals as we transition into the specifics of our project here tonight. As Andrew mentioned, my name is Aaron Ditzler. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to present the roadway reconstruction improvements for the President's A and B neighborhood. All right, on the screen, the President's A and B neighborhood is bounded on the west by Washington Avenue, on the north by 3rd Street and 2nd Street. These two streets are also the city limits of Edina and Hopkins. It's also bordered on the east by Tyler Avenue and on the south by Maloney Avenue. Maloney Avenue is not included in the project area. It is a municipal state aid street. The remainder of the streets are local streets. 2nd Street is also not included in the project area. 2nd Street was reconstructed in 2013 at a project that was helmed by the city of Hopkins. Tyler Court, south of Maloney Avenue, this cul-de-sac is included in the project area. Project details include there's 301 properties, 2.7 miles of road, and over 35,000 square yards of street pavement. Let's kick things off with the utility improvements. Based on the existing water main conditions, we're proposing to replace all of the water main pipe, all of the water services, all of the gate valves, and all the hydrants. The new hydrants will have the stores coupling for quicker fire department connections. We're also going to verify that the hydrants have appropriate spacing, and if needed, we'll be adding additional hydrants. All the water main improvements will be paid for by the water main fund. Sanitary sewer improvements, we're proposing short spot trunk main pipe repairs, as well as the installation of cured in place pipe liners to reduce infiltration. The pipe liner will be a hot water or steam cured liner, which is a structural liner inside the old clay host pipe. We're also proposing to replace manhole castings and rings, which will prevent inflow. And all the sanitary sewer improvements will be paid for by the sanitary sewer fund.
You might want to explain on that slide what I&I is.
I&I is inflow and infiltration.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, storm sewer improvements. We're proposing modifications to the roadway and storm sewer to improve existing drainage issues. What we mean by that, for the roadway, we're proposing to increase the street grades where warranted and feasible to improve drainage, as well as extending or upgrading storm sewer as necessary. We're proposing to replace all of the concrete curb and gutter, as well as install a sump drain pipe where feasible. We're also going to be communicating with property owners that they have an opportunity to connect their private sump drain pipes to the city's sump drain pipe. That'll be located just below the grass by the concrete curb and gutter. This will be a completely optional opportunity for residents to do that, only if they choose. All the storm sewer improvements will be paid for by the storm sewer fund. That wraps up the utility improvements. Let's move on to the roadways. The roadways were originally constructed with a gravel surface in the 1950s, followed by the installation of sanitary sewer, water main, and storm sewer, and then finally asphalt paving in the 1960s. All the street widths are 30 feet wide in the project area, and the soils underneath the roadways are primarily clay soils with some silty sandy soils. The city rates each street's pavement condition once every 4 years. The citywide average pavement condition index rating is 78. And the President's A and B neighborhood average pavement condition rating for the streets is 26. We also have a couple alleys I'd like to point out tonight. We've got one gravel alley between Washington and Adams Avenue, as well as an asphalt alley between Jefferson and Madison Avenues. These two alleys in particular generate concerns from our Public Works Department, primarily about required snow maintenance during snow plowing operations. That's due to the gravel material, as well as the significant pavement deterioration on the alley between Jefferson and Madison Avenues. Therefore, we are proposing improvements to both alleys. The gravel alley will get a new 10-foot wide asphalt alley, and the existing asphalt alley between Jefferson and Madison Avenues will be fully reconstructed with new pavement. In both of these alleys, we're going to review the subgrade soils underneath the gravel base to make sure those soils are stable and able to support vehicular traffic. I always like to point out with street reconstruction projects that there are features within the city right-of-way, particularly those that are up adjacent to the curb and gutter that are likely to be impacted with construction. Those include landscaping features, as well as steps and private outwalks to homes, along with retaining walls, irrigation systems and pet containment fences as well as property owners' lawns. We will be restoring lawns with new topsoil and sod. Our current practice is to replace irrigation systems and pet containment fences that are impacted by construction. We're also going to be replacing impacted retaining walls as well as steps and outwalks. In particular, we will be coordinating with property owners that have impacted landscaping so we can replace these landscaping features after the roadway work is complete. One more unique thing I'd like to point out before we go into the proposed roadway improvements. Generally, these neighborhoods may have one or two non-standard driveways. President's A and B has approximately 20 non-standard driveways. And what do I mean by that? We've got a number of driveways that do not have garages today. We've got some examples of gravel driveways, again with multiple concrete curb driveway openings. Another example, we've got concrete driveway aprons that are more narrow than the existing driveway. We also have other driveway aprons that are wider than the existing driveway. So we will be reaching out to property owners if we're going to be potentially refining some of these non-standard driveways during construction. Okay, proposed roadway improvements. The street widths will vary throughout the project area. Most
Would
are
you go
going to
back
be...
to that prior slide, please? And I think
Yes.
folks would be interested in knowing what you're going to be in contact with them, but for what purpose? What's your notion here on those non-standard driveways?
Yep, we're likely going to be talking. So for these, we're not going to remove people's driveways that don't have garages. We're not proposing to do that. In this instance, we'll be coordinating with property owners. We're likely going to be widening this driveway apron here to match their driveway width. There might be other ones that we're going to shorten, ones that are too wide. Some folks have, I think this particular property might have another driveway apron that goes to a garage on Belmore. This driveway apron may be removed during construction. Those are some of the examples of correspondence that we'll be having with the property owners.
So is the gravel driveway on the left side of that photo, is that actually a driveway or is that just a parking area? Does that continue on to the back of the house?
No, it stops. It's generally a parking area. I think this property does have another driveway apron with a garage too on this is a corner lot here.
Okay, so the notion there would be to eliminate the curb cut?
Most likely, yes,
You'll talk to the homeowner about that.
correct.
Okay. The homeowner may be here. We don't know. We'll find out.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, street widths are going to vary throughout the project area. Most will be 27 feet wide when you measure it between the face of curb and the face of curb. The majority are going to have no changes to their current parking, and there will be exceptions to this, which we'll touch on in a few slides. Let's start out with the local street standard. And again, all the streets in this project area are local streets. The proposed street width for local streets without multimodal facilities is 27 feet wide. Again, all the streets in the project area are 30 feet wide today, so we'll be reducing the street widths by 3 feet. Generally, in instances like this, we will try to narrow evenly on each side of the street as a starting point during our design. That's not a etched in stone rule. We always look at things like topography, existing trees, other infrastructure, so that may not always be the rule, but we usually start with that. Parking on both sides is proposed to remain. And again, this is the local street standard for sidewalk or streets without sidewalk or shared use path improvements. So all but 4 of the streets will have this typical section, and we'll get into those 4 streets, beginning with 3rd Street. Again, 3rd Street is the north boundary of the project area. This street is shared with Edina on the south side and City of Hopkins on the north side. This street has a shared use path on the north side, 10 feet wide, right on the back of curb. We are proposing to narrow the street width from 30 feet wide to 24 feet wide, which is the standard for streets with a sidewalk or shared use path on it. This is a reduction in the street width of 6 feet. We are proposing that narrowing occur completely on the south side of the street. The reason is to protect the existing curb and gutter and shared use path on the north side. That shared use path was constructed in 2013 by the City of Hopkins, who also maintains that shared use path. And parking, we're proposing to change it from parking on both sides to parking on only one side. There's no homes on the north side today, so we're proposing parking on the south side. At this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Andrew Scipione, Transportation Planner. He's going to talk about the other 3 streets that have sidewalk and shared use paths associated with them. He'll talk a little bit more about the Ped and Bike Master Plan and the changes to it for this particular
All right,
neighborhood.
Mr. Disser,
Sure.
Councilmember Agnew has a question for you.
Thank you. So when we're doing this work, will that 8.5-foot drive lane on the north side be abutting the shared use path, or is there any like boulevard or grass in between the two?
Good question, Member Agnew. There will not be any boulevard. There's no boulevard there today. It's directly on the back of curb there. Today there is a buffer with the parking lane there on the north side. But to answer your question, there'd be no additional buffer there. I would point out the shared use path is 10 feet wide, so generous amount of space to, stay away from vehicular traffic in that part of the lane.
And so you're saying you're not going to even be touching the curb on that side?
That's correct.
Okay. And then if we could go back one slide, help me understand the implications or intent in moving from 30 feet to 27 feet. What's the benefit by reducing the width?
Well, again, this is our local street standard for the Living Streets Plan. Benefits include less costs. Again, these projects are assessed, so less cost to the residents, less cost for maintenance of the pavement of the street. There's also generally narrowing the street, narrows things up with parking. So generally, vehicles travel slower typically, so it provides a traffic calming as well. Another big aspect to it is it reduces the impacts of things like trees, which is an important aspect as well. And then the general just more of the stormwater, rainfall just go into the grass and infiltrate into the grass.
Thank you.
And then residents pick up another 1.5 feet on each side of the street for a front yard.
Correct.
All right. And would you go back to the next slide again before Mr. Scipione talks? Why did you decide to put recommend the parking be on the south side of 3rd Street as opposed to the parking lane being next to the shared use path?
It's a good question, Mayor.
To buffer those people that are using the path.
Yep. And we very well could do that. That's an option to do. We chose that simply because there's no homes on the north side today. The north side of this shared use path here is the old super value or the UNFI industrial kind of area there. The only homes on this 3rd Street are on the south side, so we put parking on the south side. It could go on the north side. That's an option we could consider.
Mayor, our thought was that the most likely users of that on-street parking would be the residential properties on the south side. So rather than require them to park on the north side and cross the street to get to their properties, our thought was it would be more convenient to park on their side of the street.
And then they pick up on the proposed 24-foot road width. Looks like they're picking up about 6 additional feet of side yard.
Correct, because we're planning to hold that north curb line, so the reduction in the street would be seen on the south side.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Jackson and Councilmember Risser.
Yeah, so just briefly, when we talk about traffic calming, can you tell us where the data and analysis comes from that narrowing the streets calms the traffic?
That's a good question. Yeah.
When we were developing our Living Streets plan in 2014, 2015, there was a lot of kind of industry-wide research that was done to come up with those street widths for that rationale. Since then, as we've implemented Living Streets, we've done post-reconstruction traffic counts and volume counts on these streets, and we have seen anywhere from 1 to 2 miles per hour to as much as a 5 mile per hour reduction in speeds on these local streets. So we do have the data to support that there is a traffic calming benefit.
Terrific, thank you.
Member Risser.
But one of my concerns is that residents only get one option, really, and that is sod. And I know we did do the street reconstruction in my neighborhood, and I specifically requested a clover seed mix, which was great because I got it, but I had to be proactive. And as I go back and I look at all of the material, there is no information about something other than sod. And it is such a water-intensive thing, and you have to care for it. And our climate action plan specifically notes that we really need to reduce dependence on turf and grass. And, I think this is a wonderful opportunity to try to give people some more options. It may even save the city some money. Certainly it would save on the amount of water that's being used. So it would be great if that language could be put into information going out to residents. And I know after the fact, somebody said, hey, why does your yard look different than mine? And, oh my gosh, I would have done that if I had known. So just want to report back on that.
Marissa, thank you for the comments. We can definitely reach out. We'll be doing a construction kickoff notification. We can put that in the notification that sod is the standard method, but certainly other options can be considered if residents are interested.
Question.
Yeah. Councilmember Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I think this is much further back in the deck, so don't try to find the slide. When there's a slide that showed the average health of the streets at, I think, 72. This neighborhood is 26. And so can you kind of give us some sense of what that means? Because, oftentimes we drive on our streets and we're like, well, this street seems fine to me. And so help us understand what we might experience with a street that has pavement condition at a 26.
Sure, Member Pierce, thank you for the question. I guess just another reminder too, a pavement rating of 100 would be a brand new street, and a pavement rating of 0 would be essentially be a gravel street. And this one being, 78 was the citywide average, this one being 26. You're likely going to be experiencing things like not as good of a ride, maybe some uneven pavement surfaces, as well as a significant amount of cracks, potential alligator cracking, as well as potholes. You may have noticed things in other neighborhoods too. There's private utility repairs, sewer and water repairs, patches in the street, things like that. That would be a number of examples of things that you may see that would reduce the rating to a 26.
Thank you.
I'm just thinking about, I don't know if Councilmember Risser was on the council at the time, but we did a project over near Melody Lake, and we used hydro seeding. They didn't like that. They didn't like the outcome of that, and so we went to sod, and now we're using sod. Yep. And the reason is because we had such a bad experience with whoever was doing the landscaping over there, as I recall. So
it wasn't just.
So when Member Risser talks about, well, maybe we should use hydro seeding instead of sod, we've got mixed opinions on that.
And I don't think
That's not what I'm talking about.
Oh,
she wants natural landscaping
And
stuff, and we can do that.
And they
Natural
have
landscaping.
done it, and it's a clover grass seed mix.
Yep.
It's not what you're talking about. And I did make that request before the change happened in Concord. And, hearing that residents will be told they don't have to just do sod, but without clear language that notes there's another, it could be a clover mix, giving them a clear option apart from sod, which is oftentimes grown on fields that are fertilized with sludge, so it is something that can move PFAS around. I think there needs to be more clarity and specificity and a clear choice. Thank you.
yeah, thanks for that clarification.
And we can do that. We'll give residents the opportunity. We send out lots of communications yet before construction.
Okay. Go ahead. Mr. Scipione, I think, is up again.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. In the neighborhood right now, there's very few multimodal facilities. As Aaron mentioned, we have a shared use path on 3rd Street and 2nd Street to the north. This path also extends to the east along the south property line of the Blake School all the way out to Blake Road. There's a shared use path in Alden Park that provides access to soccer fields and a playground. And then there's a sidewalk on the north side of Maloney, which is on the south end of this project.
Andrew, before you go back one. I want to make it clear at the council, the Hopkins-Edina border is right down the center of the street. So that's another reason we're trying to protect that trail on the north, protect the curb over there, because that's in Hopkins. and they don't have funding, they don't have anything in their CIP to participate in this project. So I just want to make that clear if it seems weird why we're trying to protect that north side, that it's actually in the city of Hopkins.
Okay. The one thing that I've been curious about is why you don't have Maloney included. So and you said it was a state aid street, but you know,
Correct.
I need more information than that, because it seems like that's the main thoroughfare through there. I can't remember what the condition of it was, having walked over there in that neighborhood. Maybe you visited with some of you at your homes during the re-election campaign, but Maloney being the main thoroughfare through there, I want to make sure that we're not short-sighted here if we're thinking about doing this and we decide to go forward with it.
Of course, thank you for the question, Mayor. So as Director Miller mentioned, Maloney is a state aid road, which means that it gets funding from a different source than our local streets. Maloney was reconstructed in 2011, so it is a newer condition than these local streets.
Okay, thank you for that. That's a more thorough explanation and understandable than why we wouldn't be doing Maloney again if it was done 13 years ago.
Of course.
All right.
So as I mentioned before, one of the main documents that we look to when we're designing these projects is a pedestrian and bicycle master plan. So within this neighborhood, the Ped and Bike Master Plan recommends a sidewalk on Monroe Avenue, sidewalk and bike lanes on Washington Avenue, which is, we'll explain a little bit more later, but it's difficult to get both of those facilities in due to limited right-of-way on Washington. And the plan also provides no multimodal connection to Alden Park, which is right in the middle of this neighborhood. We also consulted with the city of Hopkins. They have a pedestrian and bicycle master plan. Within this area, their plan recommends a bike boulevard on 3rd Street and 2nd Street. It's noted in the pink dotted line here. After speaking to Hopkins staff, they no longer support that type of facility. A bike boulevard would mean sharrows on the lane, on the pavement and signage, but essentially it would be a shared lane between bikes and motor vehicles. So as Hopkins is no longer supportive of these kind of facilities, and because there already exists an off-street facility for bicyclists, that shared use path, we're not recommending to add the bike boulevard as part of this project. So what we are proposing is to seek kind of a balance between our strategic goals, input that we've heard from residents, from the commission, and the construction impacts. So we are proposing that sidewalk on Monroe on the east side that is recommended by the Ped and Bike Master Plan. We're also recommending a shared use path on the east side of Washington. This is based on the Ped and Bike Master Plan recommendation in that it provides a facility for pedestrians and cyclists, but it combines them into one facility where the plan recommends a separate sidewalk and bike lanes. In addition, we're proposing a shared use path on Belmore Lane on the north side between Washington and Dearborn Court. This is not in the Ped and Bike Master Plan, but we feel that this provides a connection to the park, and in doing so fulfills a lot of the objectives in those guiding plans. These facilities will connect to existing facilities and proposed on 2nd and 3rd Street, Monroe, Maloney, and Lincoln Drive outside the project limits. They also provide multimodal connections to Alden Park, Harley Hopkins Park, and Van Valkenburg Park, to the Harley Hopkins Family Center and the Blake School, to downtown Hopkins, as well as to Metro Transit Route 612 and the Metro Transit Green Line Extension, or Southwest LRT.
Could you tell us what the proposed width is for the shared use pathway on Belmore?
It is 8 feet. I'm about to get into those in these next slides.
Very good. Yes, Councilmember Jackson.
Yes, thank you. So outside the project borders, where are there existing sidewalks? So looks like there's an existing sidewalk on Maloney. Is there an existing sidewalk on Belmore to the east or not?
There is not. There are no facilities on Belmore outside the project limits. The sidewalk on Monroe kind of cuts up here, but this sidewalk extends to the north all the way to Excelsior Boulevard. Also on Van Buren Avenue, on both sides of the street, that sidewalk extends all the way to Excelsior Boulevard. There are no facilities on Lincoln Drive to the south here right now, but there's proposed a standard bike lane as well as a sidewalk. And then there's this shared use path here, kind of by 3rd Street, goes underneath Highway 169 and connects to other shared use paths that eventually get you to Excelsior Boulevard and downtown Hopkins.
Okay, so there are no existing sort of end of the line sidewalks that what we're adding is new And I'm just trying to think, because it seemed like at some point in time in that neighborhood, there is some place where the sidewalk just kind of stops, but that's outside this area.
Yeah, they're all technically just outside the project limit. So for example, Maloney Avenue to the east connects to Blake Road. To the west, it just dead ends at Washington. Similarly, the sidewalks that are in Hopkins on Monroe and Van Buren, they end at that shared use path on 2nd and 3rd, but there's nowhere to go south of there other than on the street.
Okay, good, thank you.
Councilmember Risser.
This came up with the Concord Street and sidewalk creation. Who is going to be responsible for clearing the new shared use pathway on Belmore Lane for the snow and all of that?
Sure, I'd be happy. I have that answer in a couple slides. So I'll start with Monroe Avenue. So we are proposing to reduce the overall street width by 6 feet. We would remove parking on the west side of the street, so parking would still be permitted on the east side. And on that east side, we would have a 5-foot boulevard separated sidewalk. This sidewalk is proposed to be maintained by the adjacent property owners. On Belmore Lane, again, we're proposing to reduce the street width by 6 feet. We will remove parking on the south side and continue to permit parking on the north side. We're proposing a new 8-foot shared use path on the north side from Washington to Dearborn. This shared use path will be maintained by the city adjacent to the park, but it will be maintained by private property owners otherwise. And then on Washington Avenue, again, a 6-foot reduction in the street width. The parking on the east side is proposed to remain, and then we're proposing an 8-foot shared use path on the east side from Maloney to 3rd in place of that sidewalk and bike lane that the Ped and Bike Plan recommends. This path will also be maintained by adjacent property owners. The Transportation Commission had an opportunity to review this study at their October regular meeting. At that meeting, they supported our proposed facilities on Belmore and Monroe. They recommended separated pedestrian and bicycle facilities on Washington, so essentially consistent with what the Ped and Bike Plan recommends. Here, these graphics, you can see the top one is what staff is proposing for Washington. On the south underneath that is a mock-up of what the ETC is recommending. So there you see the separated on-street bike lanes and then a standard 5-foot sidewalk. This section would require us to completely remove the on-street parking on Washington Avenue to make room. The commission also asked us to consider putting in new street trees as part of this project. That's currently not part of the proposal, primarily due to cost. The ETC has also written an advisory communication, which is part of this report related to the multimodal facilities in this project. And so I'll turn it over to Chair of the ETC, Andy Lewis, who will speak to this advisory communication.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, council members, mayor.
Welcome. Commissioner, welcome.
Absolutely. So you'll see that we did include an advisory communication pertaining to this project specifically in your packet, and it pertains specifically to, as Andrew described, the dedicated and separated bike and ped infrastructure on Washington Avenue. So if you go back to what we spoke about earlier in terms of the bike ped master plan, that plan does call for dedicated bike facilities, dedicated pedestrian facilities. And so when we think about this is our chance to redevelop this road, and in the spirit of Director Milner's presentation earlier, hopefully not touch it for quite some time afterward, this is our chance to do what is in the city's bike and ped master plan. So we felt strongly that we should fulfill the plan that's in front of us until there is a different plan, and so hence putting that communication in place. More broadly speaking, you'll see here there's a couple of other comments about shared use paths in general. And so to Councilmember Risser's point, we had a discussion about this in the Concord B and C neighborhood reconstruction as well. And so we've been back and forth on shared use paths. We've favored them because they have not impeded with snow removal. They've sort of been an average solution to give us some bike infrastructure, some ped infrastructure. But it hasn't been consistent. We have sidewalks, we have some on-street bike, we have some shared use paths, not all of which is consistent with the bed and bike master plan. So from our standpoint, we are trying to follow the plans in front of us until or unless we have different guidance from council as to how to move forward. So you'll see here, as I mentioned, in Concord B and C, we had sought separate bike ped facilities down Wooddale. Those didn't work out. We sought different bike and ped facilities on Concord. That didn't work out as well. So less specific to the president's reconstruction, part of our request on a longer term basis is clarity from council as it pertains to these projects around, we have a bike ped master plan, we're trying our best to uphold it with our input from the commission, but also trying to seek what is the perspective of council, perspective of our residents. So you'll see here the advisory commission is specific to the project, but these are just some of the questions that as we've discussed this, looking back at last year's initiative and when we've looked at this one, some of the questions that have come up. Separated bike lanes mean different things to different people, but there's the question, would we protect them with bollards, with concrete? We haven't done that before. We know snow removal is really important in the city. We see it in quality of life surveys. We know that that's very, very important to residents, but it does constrict us in our ability to uphold what's in the Ped and Bike Master Plan. And related to this particular initiative, it is true. What we've proposed as a commission does remove parking, and we don't take that lightly. But similarly, we can't fulfill some of the objectives that are ahead of us if we don't make some of those trade-offs. So put a bow on all of it. That was our recommendation that we felt strongly we put in front of you for this particular project, but it leaves us with probably some questions for future reconstruction as well.
Questions for the chair? Yes. Member Risser.
As far as shared use goes, my understanding is an 8-foot wide path is as narrow as you go. Is that true?
I'll defer to Andrew, but I believe so.
Yes, the 8-foot wide is essentially the industry minimum width. You see them anywhere from 8 feet to 12 feet.
Okay.
Yes, Member Agnew.
Thank you. So if we could go back to the view of Washington, I don't remember if there was another view, but if you could help me understand what's directly to the north that this could potentially be connecting to, and then what is to the south existing today?
Thank you for the question. So to the north, there's not really much. There's an industrial property. That sidewalk kind of stubs up a little bit there. You can see the orange line on the graphic here. And then the shared use path, as I mentioned before, extends underneath 169, continues to the west through a primarily industrial area until it connects to downtown Hopkins.
And is there parking to the north along that industrial site?
I don't believe so, but I would have to take a look at that.
I couldn't tell from the street view either, so, okay. And then, sorry, I interrupted, but you're gonna tell me to the south.
To the south, there's no multimodal infrastructure right now. But again, as I mentioned before, there's proposed to be a sidewalk and bike lanes.
Is there any tentative timing on what those could look like of when that would be installed to the south?
It is not currently in our 5-year capital improvement plan, and it's unlikely to be within the next 10 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Yes. Councilmember
Yes.
Jackson, go ahead.
So, Chair Lewis, what is the feeling, your feeling, and if you can speak for your committee or for commission about the safety of on-street bicycle riding? Obviously, you're recommending it, but it's unlikely that we're going to get cement things, and even the delineators are not particularly safe if you put them on. So, is there a trade-off in safety from going from the shared use to the street lanes for bicyclists?
There absolutely is. Yeah, and I mean, I'll speak from lived experience. I've biked this street and biked many of the streets in the city here, and it does feel better to be off the street. But I think to some of the more macro questions here, I think we're sort of struggling with what we've experienced and what's possible, meaning we've proposed shared use paths. Sometimes we've put them in place. I think about 62nd Street, for example, we have it. 58th Street, we don't. Back to Concord, we talked about that on Wooddale, we talked about it on Concord, we ended up with a sidewalk and don't have any infrastructure. So, at the risk of maybe lowering our expectations, we feel like it is dedicated bike infrastructure. Would we prefer it to be more protected than on street? Of course, but I maybe didn't mention earlier, we've heard, I believe from council, but certainly from residents about safety concerns on shared use paths, right? Cyclists don't feel safe because there are folks walking don't feel safe because they're cyclists. And so we're at least at a minimum trying to create separation there. Obviously that comes at the expense of a biker then not being separated from traffic. But to the point of trade-offs, we're trying to balance all of those things and get as much clarity as we can on maybe the direction that you'd like us to take.
So the consideration of putting the bike lanes on the street, even though there is some trade-off, edges towards more safety for the bike riders. Am I hearing that correctly?
I would say bike riders and pedestrians. I think
Okay.
the concern about pedestrians and having bikers sharing space with pedestrians on shared use paths is something that we have heard before in multiple different iterations. So we're trying to be respectful of that as well. And when you picture the photos that we put in place, parents walking with a stroller down that sidewalk isn't always compatible with somebody who's using that for cycling.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Pierce.
Just to follow up on that, oftentimes I think what our plan isn't what we get in practice. And so I wonder, for cyclists, I still believe if we have shared use path, and whether we have a dedicated road path or not, I still think there's going to be a fair number of cyclists that prefer to be in the road because they are road cyclists. And so I think we would end up with cyclists on both paths, but the shared use path, what I've seen there is more what I guess I'll call the amateur cyclists. It's, kids, adults, more out for a leisure bike ride. But I think we're going to always end up with both, no matter which option we choose. Is that fair?
I think it is. And in our advisory communication, and as you've seen on the screen here, we supported a shared use path as a part of this project, right? So I should probably say that part out loud, that this isn't an absolutist position. I think our point of view on Washington specifically was this is a case where it specifically says in the Ped Bike Master Plan, separate facilities for each, if not now, then when. But it's not realistic, I think, with the diversity of different streets and projects that we're doing to say that in every case it must be or has to be.
Yeah.
I don't think that's realistic, to be sure.
And then maybe just an aside, just curious on the commission's view, once you start to take the context I set and then you add e-bikes to that, from a safety perspective, how does the commission view that?
I think we have a lot of work to do on that front. I think we've talked about that in some of our working sessions as well. I think probably at a bare minimum, that's a case where I would probably return back to separation, which is whether road, whether on-street bike facilities, at a bare minimum, sharrows or that type of infrastructure, still better than being in the same environment as pedestrians. So
Okay.
we have more work to do there, but I think at a bare minimum, we want to make sure that they're away from pedestrians.
Thank you.
Director Miller, remind me what we did over on Blake Road. Was that, we put in a shared use pathway over there?
We did both in most locations. As we got closer to Hopkins, we kind of had to shrink that sidewalk to protect those older trees. But we have on-street 5-foot bike lanes and a sidewalk that gets wider as you get further away from those trees, and as you get down to the roundabout, they're 10 or 12 feet wide with bike lanes too. So we have both. And that's municipal state aid street in a little different context than the local street.
Yeah, local street. I mean, when I've been over there in the neighborhood, I don't view, it's a charming neighborhood, but once you get over in Washington Avenue, though there are people living there and happy living there, it feels like you've got the sound wall on one side on the highway, and then you've got the housing on the other side, and it feels faster over there, and I don't know what do we have any speed and volume data from Washington Avenue? That might be influential in talking about
We
this?
did, I should have mentioned that, Andrew, you may recall the numbers, but I think it was a pretty high ADT on Washington.
I don't recall the numbers offhand. They are in the report. I believe Director Milner is looking them up, but I believe the ADT on Washington was upward of 2,000 vehicles per day.
Yeah, okay, and do we know everything about average speed over there?
I believe it is in the report. I just don't have those numbers in front of me.
It's 3,000 ADT and speeds almost 39 miles an hour. So it's way higher than
40
the
miles
rest
an hour and 3,000 vehicles a day.
on Washington.
On Washington.
That's the highest for both volume and speeds. Yep.
So was that a basis for you recommending the shared pathway to keep everybody a little bit safer, not on the street?
That was part of it. It had more to do with the limited right-of-way. As you mentioned, there's the highway on the west side, and there's infrastructure related to the highway that's in between the sound wall and that curb that we really can't impact. So we're really limited to holding that western curb line and making changes on the east side of the street. And again, in order to, if we wanted to put in what the plan recommends, a bike lane or 2 bike lanes and a sidewalk, we would have to remove that on-street parking, which would make Washington the only street in this neighborhood that has no on-street parking.
Okay, and do we know the extent that on-street parking occurs on Washington Avenue now?
We do not have an exact number, no. It's something that we surveyed, but we only received, I think, about 20% response back on that survey.
All right, well, I'm sure some of the folks in the neighborhood can help on that. Member Agnew, do you have a follow-up?
I do, because this visual helped. Is it actually a 13-foot planting strip on the left side?
Approximately.
Okay. What is the need to maintain that and take away from the residents? Because I understand there aren't any residents on the west side, correct?
Correct. There's a number of infrastructure related to the highway that is in there. Most of it is street lighting, but on the northern side of the project area, there are 2 large transformers or electrical boxes that they cannot be relocated.
And there's a big overhead sign for 169. The base is in that 13 feet. So almost half of that is a big base for a sign that goes over Highway 169.
Okay. All right. Member Risser.
It looks like the 9 Mile Creek Trail would be close to Washington. Is that true? So if you, and I could be looking at this incorrectly, but
It's down at
What
the
is-
next exit to the south. Well, it goes through Hopkins on 8th Street.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it goes across just north of Londonderry Road to the west, continues through Smetana and I can't remember the names of those other streets. There is, closer to this project area, north of Excelsior, is the Cedar Lake Trail.
okay, so the Cedar Lake Trail would be the closest, but it is pretty close though, isn't it?
Correct, yep, it's
Okay.
just on the north side of Excelsior Boulevard.
I think you might be thinking of both. The 9 Mile Creek Trail, I do think if you were to continue south, as you see it on the screen here, where the red and blue lines are, that would bring you close to 9 Mile Creek. May wind around, may twist around a little bit.
Not quite.
I don't think we can get there.
Yeah.
It's the next exit to the south. We can show you some
Yeah.
graphics if you want that for next time.
North, I don't think.
That would be very helpful for next time to see how it ties into
Okay.
any bike trails that are existing.
The bridge
Okay.
is like a mile of mark.
Unless there's any other questions, I'll turn it back over to Assistant City Engineer Aaron Ditzler to talk about
I don't
project
know if
costs.
we answered Member Agnew's question adequately. Member Agnew did, yeah, I don't think, to the point Member Jackson's making, there's no access to the 9 Mile Creek Trail from this neighborhood
Well-
directly.
We'll bring a map next time just to zoom out, because you can take 3rd Street and get there, and you can go south a little bit and meander through Hopkins, so they're
Going
not
north,
that
but
far.
you can't go south on Washington and get to the
No,
9 Mile Creek
you'd have to
Trail.
go into your neighborhood, the Parkwood Mills
Yeah, you'd have to
neighborhood, to
go.
get through there, to get all the way down to Bren and Londonderry. But there's some little options, so we can show you a map next time.
Yeah, I would like to see just broader connectivity that this could enable with a zoomed out picture of whether it's 9 Mile Creek or others that might be in the area. Please.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you. All right. Thanks, Chair.
With that, I'll hand it back over to Aaron.
Okay, thank you. Let's review the estimated project cost and funding sources. The total project cost, $17.6 million. That estimated cost includes engineering, clerical, and finance-related costs. It also includes a construction contingency. $2.5 million of this estimate will be funded by special assessments for roadway improvements. $11,700 be funded by special assessments for the gravel alley between Washington and Adams Avenue. Property taxes, we pay for a portion of the roadway improvements. Hopkins is scheduled to fund a small portion of 3rd Street and their city limits. City utility funds will cover the improvements for sanitary sewer, water main, storm sewer, and sump drain. And the pedestrian cyclist safety or PACS fund will cover sidewalk and shared use path improvements. Special assessments are proposed for the project area. They are assigned to benefiting properties of public improvements. As Mayor Hovland mentioned, previous assessment policy, the local roadway costs were assessed 100% to the property owners prior to 2021. In 2021, Council authorized an assessment policy change that said that assessments would transition from 100% local roadway costs assessed over to property taxes incrementally over 16 years. So the current assessment policy says that for the construction year 2025, the local roadway costs should be assessed 57.86%. All right, what do the special assessment costs include? They include roadway improvements for roadway and driveway removals, the asphalt pavement surface, as well as the gravel base underneath, restoration of the driveways, as well as topsoil and sod or clover, as well as indirect costs, engineering, finance, soil investigations, and mailings. So again, 57.86% of the roadway project costs are proposed to be assessed to President's A and B neighborhood. The remainder covered by property taxes.
So just to make, just as a reminder, under the restoration category, it would include any pet containment systems or irrigation systems that people have that are disrupted due to the construction?
That is correct, Mayor.
Repair of those facilities?
That is correct.
Okay.
So one more time, not included in the assessments, again, are improvements related to sanitary sewer, water main, storm sewer, sump drain, concrete curb and gutter, sidewalk, paths. Also not included in special assessments are if the soils underneath the roadway and gravel base are poor and unstable, we're going to replace those soils with more stable soils to better support the road and the vehicles that go on it. So in this particular neighborhood, those costs are expected to be significant. Special assessments are distributed based on residential equivalent units, or REUs. The REU factor is used to compare different land use classes to a single-family residential property. That REU factor is 1. The single-family REU factor, it's for lot sizes regardless of the lot area or the lot front footage.
And the theory on that is what?
Corner properties of both side streets in the project area are assessed the same as somebody mid-block. A 1 acre property would be the same as a different property size, generally. But generally, these maintenance groups or these project areas typically generally have the same size lot areas.
And aren't the trips a factor as well? The estimated trips per household?
Correct.
That was why we use an REU.
Yeah, in the past, the assessment policy was based on front footage of properties before my time, but I think the policy was changed because the The idea was that everyone's using the roads regardless of their lot front footage. We have an additional land use class in this project area. It's a multifamily residential properties. These are assessed at 0.8 REU per living unit. Okay, estimated roadway assessments. There are 301 properties in the project area. Single family homes are assessed 1 REU. These are shown in blue. Corner properties with one side street outside the project area are assessed 0.5 REUs. Those are shown in yellow. We've got a handful of multi-family residential properties along Washington Avenue. The orange properties are 2 units on one property. So 0.8 REUs times 2 units, 1.6 for the orange properties. We've got an additional multifamily residential property along Washington and Maloney Avenue with one side street outside the project area. This green property is proposed to be assessed 0.4 REU. And then we've got the purple lot is the city-owned Alden Park, which is proposed at 4 REUs. So we summarize up all of the REUs in the project area.
You might want to explain why we look at a city park as being a potential contributor to the project, how we do that.
Correct. Generally, we assign REUs based on if the property is a developable lot. So the theory is that we would consider how many developable lots there would be along Belmore Lane. So we determine that there'd potentially be 4 lots to be developed on that portion of the park there.
Thank you.
Okay, determining the estimated roadway assessments, we take the roadway project cost, we separate out the portion that will be covered by property taxes. We take the $2.5 million divided by the total number of REUs. We get an estimated roadway assessment of $8,600 per REU. This amount is estimated. It will not be final until after construction is complete. This estimated amount does include construction contingency, so we do hope this amount does go down. Side note, if we were using the prior assessment policy, if this neighborhood were to have been assessed 100% for the local roadway improvements, as well as the replacement of poor soils underneath the asphalt pavement and gravel base, which is again expected to be significant, the assessment amount would be nearly $23,000 per REU. But thankfully, we don't have that assessment policy. We have the revised one that those things are not included. So again, $8,600 per REU estimated roadway assessment. Alley assessments. If we review the gravel alley between Washington and Adams Avenue, there's 9 properties as shown in blue here that are adjacent to the gravel alley. We take the gravel alley project cost, separate out the portion covered by property taxes, divided by the total number of REUs. We get an estimated alley assessment of $1,300 per REU. This as well also includes construction contingency. We hope this amount goes down. We are proposing to improve the alley between Madison and Jefferson Avenue. There were some previous alley improvements there back in 2006. These properties were assessed in orange back in 2007. Therefore, we're proposing 0 REUs for these properties shown in orange. Okay, state statute chapter 429 has a special benefit test. It says that special assessments are valid if the assessment does not exceed the special benefit as measured by the increase in market value due to the improvement. Therefore, we hired a licensed and qualified appraisal firm. They did prepare a preliminary market benefit estimate. That report said that properties could see an average price benefit of $9,000 to $12,000 per buildable lot for the roadway, and the alleys could see an average price benefit of $3,000 to $4,000. And again, based on our previous two slides, the roadway assessment, $8,600, is below the preliminary market benefit estimate range, as well as the gravel alley is too. Let's review the assessment payment options. The final assessment amount will be mailed to property owners 1 year after the project is complete. So in September 2026 is that mailing. Payment options include paying the entire assessment amount upon receiving the bill within that first 30 days to avoid future interest charges. The next option is pay a minimum 25% within that first 30 days, interest-free. Then the assessment balance rolls over to property taxes spread out over 15 years with interest. The next option is roll over the entire assessment amount over to property taxes spread out over 15 years with interest. The interest rate will be determined in September 2026. Historically, it's ranged anywhere from 2 to 6%. The assessment here in 2024, the interest rate was 4.7%. Finally, property owners can defer the payment if 65 years of age or older and meet specific income requirements. Property owners can reach out to the assessment department to learn about those requirements. Okay, we're close to wrapping up. Project schedule. Typically, staff reaches out generally 2 to 3 years before reconstruction begins. Staff prepared a video presentation and made that available on the Better Together Edina project webpage. We sent postcards about that video in September 2022 and October 2023. City staff invited residents to an open house at the Public Works facility on September 24th. That open house was also recorded, and that video was made available on the Better Together Edina project webpage. We sent a postcard to all the property owners again, inviting those to watch the video if they couldn't attend the open house. Staff presented the draft ETC, or draft engineering study, to the Transportation Commission at the meeting on October 24th. Tonight is the public hearing where residents can provide testimony to staff and City Council. They may continue to provide that testimony until noon December 11th, when the public hearing will close. The decision on the public hearing scheduled for the council meeting on December 17th. That's where council will decide whether or not to move forward with the design of the project and authorize the contractor bidding phase. If that moves forward, staff will design the plans and prepare specifications in December through February. Contractor bidding will occur in March and April 2025. We'll be back to council to consider awarding a construction contract in April 2025, and construction will be scheduled to begin in April or May 2025. Construction is scheduled to conclude likely in November 2025, and the assessment hearing will occur 1 year after construction is complete in October 2026. Quick reminder, not making any decisions tonight, but approving pedestrian and bicycle improvements requires a minimum of 3 out of 5 council votes in favor to pass. So in conclusion, staff believes the project is feasible, cost-effective, and necessary to improve the public infrastructure. So we recommend the council make a motion to close the public hearing on noon, December 11th, and continue the action on the item to the December 17th council meeting for improvement number BA 466, which are the roadway improvements, and A293, which are the alley improvements. That will conclude the presentation. Thank you for your patience, and staff will stand for additional questions and comments from mayor and members of the council. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ditzler. I
And
see
we
Director
were-
Milner. Director Milner's heading somewhere with
I'm heading somewhere.
the.
So Mr. Scipione was able to get some regional maps of the bike trails in the area, so we don't have to bring that
All right.
back. So right here is that corner of 3rd Street in Washington we were talking about with 169. So just a little north is the Cedar Lake Regional Trail. Minnesota River Bluffs heads out towards Minnetonka area and Chaska area. Here's the Nymau Creek where it comes up
Yep.
8th Street or 11th Street. So you could kind of cut through the neighborhood. Here's a different view of the Nymau Creek Regional Trail, and here's Maloney and Washington right there. So there is some streets here you can get over to the trail. So you're very close, just a few blocks, but not a direct connection. But any proposed facilities that we're doing connects here to 3rd where there is a sidewalk on that facility. And you're almost connecting to those regional trails. So. And then we just wanted to tweak that motion, ask you to close the public hearing tonight, but we'll keep public testimony open until Wednesday at noon. I think we had that clarification.
Close the in-person public hearing
In-person.
this evening.
We'll continue to take feedback until Wednesday so we can get that in the packet for you for next Tuesday. So like
Sure.
Aaron mentioned, we'd be happy to stand for any additional questions you might have before we start the public hearing.
All right, let's see if any council members have any supplemental questions for staff. Councilmember Agnew.
I have just a couple. So this is going way back to the beginning of the presentation tonight. Why are we replacing everything related to the water main? There is the slide of all of everything. Walk me through the logic in that.
Yep, good question, Member Agnew. So last year or a couple of years ago, we hired a firm to do acoustical testing of the water main to determine if there was any pipe thickness loss in the water main. We also have a history of water main breaks that we've been tallying up over the years that we've had to repair. So based on the combination of those two things, we saw that the water main was deteriorated significantly enough that we didn't think, we try to make these streets last for generally 60 years with good maintenance. So we didn't want to leave these water mains in poor condition while we put in a brand new street. So we felt that the water main had deteriorated enough to replace all of the water main.
Thank you. And during the reconstruction, if they happened upon something that actually turned out to be still in good condition, is there opportunity to still salvage it? Or walk me through how kind of the acoustic test might be different than what we find to be reality?
So, good question, Member Agnew. I would say that would be challenging to do. We likely, when we're replacing things like hydrant, we can look at the condition of the water main that we're close to connecting to. I would also note that we've been doing the acoustical testing for at least 10 years now. So it's been really a good indicator of the condition of the water main. So I would be very surprised if we end up keeping some of the water main in. But that could be an opportunity as we're replacing things like the hydrants in advance of the new water main that we could conceivably look at potentially making some changes.
Thank you. Are there any alleys that are not being impacted that are within this area?
Yes. There's one additional alley east of Harrison. It's a very short alley that I believe it serves one home. It's adjacent to another home. It just has one garage to it. The pavement is in relatively good condition, so we're not proposing to complete that alley.
Well, I'll just add on to it. I wouldn't even call it an alley because it's serving one property. It's basically a long driveway. It just happens to go behind a different property, get to the next one. There's like 2 or 3 of those that are driveways. So we're working with those property owners saying that's not a city facility. You should be maintaining that yourself.
Okay. And then the one alleyway that we're not going to be doing the RUs for.
Yep.
As I understood that is we just redid it. It's not as cohesive maybe as a reconstruction effort, and therefore we aren't going to be passing those charges along because it was just touched in 2007. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, previous assessment for the alley, so that was just due to the alley, but we didn't feel it was reasonable to assess people again because we potentially didn't build it the way we should have back then. It should have lasted longer than, it didn't even last 20 years. So why would we assess them again on something that wasn't done up to standard, in my opinion?
Okay. And my last, I think, question, are there any things that are unique to our approach within this area? One thing that did stand out to me was, that there's about 20 non-standard driveways, but are there any other things that are unique to this project?
Good question. There's a neighborhood park in the project area. That's something unique. So we coordinate with our parks department, see if there's any improvement opportunity there. I think another one is there's a treatment plant on the north half of the park there, adjacent to 2nd Street.
Water treatment plant.
Water treatment plant,
So we got
yes.
to work with Public Works on how do we do the water main replacements as part of this project and keep that operating. I'll just go to the border city, right? Being alongside a highway, that's kind of unique. We don't have a lot of projects where we got half a street as highway with a big retaining wall there along 169, but also the border of Hopkins being in there. That's kind of a unique piece. I don't know if Andrew had something else.
I was also going to say being so close to those regional trails, as we showed, is unique to this project area, as well as how close this project area is to Southwest LRT. There are 2 stations, Blake Road and downtown Hopkins, that are less than a mile away.
Thank you. Those are the only questions I had.
Other council members? All right. Well, we're on that topic of replacing water mains. Folks might be interested, knowing that are in the audience, how you supply water to their homes during the period of time we're redoing water mains.
Yep, good question, Mayor. So when we're replacing water main, and we're going to be replacing the water services generally from the water main to approximately the property line. So they will be laying a temporary water main that'll be above ground. It'll be roughly 3 to 4 inches in size. And then there'll be a water service connection above ground that'll tie in generally to the spigot of the home. It'll be tying into the plumbing inside the home to provide temporary water while we are replacing the water mains and water services. So generally, it may be 3 weeks or so while property owners will be on that temporary water main until the new one can be implemented.
But no one denied water main service during any period of time during the construction.
Just a little bit while we make those connections and do the new plumbing and work with them to make sure all the valves are turned appropriately inside the home, but they're going to have the same water that they get today. It's just above ground pipes and the same service. And then when all the new water main's been tested and can be put online, then we'll switch it back over for them. A lot of work with the contractor and working with each individual resident and property owner on that work.
Okay.
And this might be a good time to jump in and say, presuming this project moves forward, we get good bids, and we move to construction, we will be holding a construction kickoff meeting prior to construction. We'll invite the whole neighborhood, and we'll be talking about all sorts of things that impact, including water shutoffs. As Chad mentioned, there'll be a period of 4 to 6 hours while we're replacing hydrants and valves. So there'll probably be 3 to 4 water shutdowns that'll be less than a day, and we'll be coordinating those with door hangers to make sure everybody is aware of when those occur in advance of that happening.
One thing that you touched on, Mr. Ditzler, I thought would be important to talk about a little bit in a little bit greater detail. And it's something that came up during the time when we were talking about, we had a task force of residents, people from your staff, and outside consultants working on modification of our street assessment policy back in 2020, adopted, I think you said, in 2021. But those soil conditions under the street that have so much variability from one neighborhood to the other, and you talked about that substrate, I think is what we called it, and in some parts of town it may require a lot of clay or other kind of substandard soil removal to be able to get the kind of base in there that we want to be able to make sure that the roadways have the kind of longevity that we want them to have based on the cost. You might want to touch briefly on that, and that's something that's just included in something everyone's paying for from the city, just like we do with everything else under the street.
Yes, good point, Mayor. And prior to the 2021 assessment policy change, replacement of poor soils with more stable soils, that could be millions of dollars on this project. Those were assessed to property owners of that neighborhood. And the task force determined that, well, how fair is that they're paying, a few extra $1,000 of assessment just because their neighborhood is in an area with poor soils. So some neighborhoods have sandy soils underneath the roadway. Very little additional work is needed when you have sandy soils underneath the asphalt pavement in the gravel base. So you can pretty much put the gravel right on top of the sand and pave it, and you're, little impact financially. There's other neighborhoods up in Morningside, we had peat soil. We needed multiple feet, 3 feet of soils needed to be removed and more stable soils brought back in. Really soft clay soils, that could be 2 feet of material that needs to be trucked off, and, larger rock material brought in to make more stable soil. And those costs can be significant on these projects.
And that's a cost we determined that we would not especially assess.
That's correct. That will be covered by property taxes.
Yeah, you can see that big jump in the first year. We can't see the table, but it was a 20% reduction that first year in the policy because we wanted to get rid of retaining walls and subcuts. That's what the task force felt. It was just not fair to be assessing those of people because it was so variable by neighborhood.
Good. Thanks for that update. All right. That prompt any other questions from council members? Otherwise, this is a public hearing matter. We've got some of our fellow residents here, and you're welcome to address the council on any matters of concern that you have with regard to this potential project. And when you come up to the podium, if you happen to have an overhead projection that you want to employ, we'll put you on the center podium. Otherwise, use the side ones, and you'll have 3 minutes to make your presentation. You'll get a yellow little warning light when you got 30 seconds left, and then to treat everybody the same way when the red light comes on, try to think about wrapping up your remarks, and then we've treated everybody equally on their presentation. So feel free to come forward and tell us anything that you want us to know from an informational standpoint. So when we get to the 17th, we've got as much information as possible to make a good decision. So please feel free to come up. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Aaron Hill. I'm a resident at 323 Monroe Avenue South. If you were to look at one of those maps, you can see the intersection between the red proposed sidewalk and the green shared use pathway. That's my house. So you can probably guess from that introduction there that I'm a little concerned about the impact of the excess maintenance burden that these improvements are going to put on homeowners, especially very specific homeowners that are going to be impacted by this in a way that is not equitable or not shared across the entire improvement plan. I will say, though, I do very strongly support and approve a roadway rebuilding, reconstruction, improving our utility services. Those are all wonderful things. I'm also very appreciative of efforts to help Washington Avenue and the traffic that is going on there, and especially pedestrian and dog walker, bicyclist safety there. That's a huge issue. That said, the significant changes to the streetways are not something that have a ton of support in the neighborhood. I'm kind of disappointed that we didn't talk very much here about the 82% of respondents who said they do not want the sidewalks in their neighborhoods or in front of their houses. That's a pretty significant statement that we're hearing from our neighbors and our constituents here that are telling us what direction we should be pushing this kind of utility improvement. The last thing I want to mention very strongly is the Alden Park. Alden Park right now, when it is used for soccer, baseball, softball, whatever other uses that are happening out there, everybody drives in, parks around it, parks up and down the other streets. We're talking about removing virtually literally half of the parking that is currently used to support that. We're now going to have people parking several blocks away, filling up the streets during those times in order to attend their children's events. I don't think this is a well thought out process in terms of what that impact is going to be. The pedestrian safety that goes along with bringing all those kids across multiple streets that are parked in tight. So I would urge that we support some significant improvements in the construction of our roads. Let's bring them back up to standard. I very much appreciate the work that we're going on that, and I think it's money well spent. That said, I don't think that we have, I've not seen or heard a good case for why we're going to change the look and feel of our neighborhood.
All right. And your thoughts on the Alden Park parking reduction? And is that third?
Yeah.
Third?
Sorry.
Belmore?
Belmore.
Oh, on Belmore, okay.
It's on Belmore, and then, of course, on Monroe as well. We give people park around the corner in order to get over to the park.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Hill.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi, my name's Nancy Hart, and I own 323 Madison, so I'm just a block away from this neighbor. And I'd actually like some clarification on the math on the redesign of Belmore, because I'm also on that corner. I was trying to add it up with the combination path and the remaining street, and I wasn't coming up with the existing 30 feet.
Okay. All right, we'll have. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, we'll deal with that. Evening.
Hi, my name is Marissa Esterly. I live at 321 Washington. My primary concern right now is timing. The proposed start time, I believe, would be in May and will take approximately 12 weeks to complete. That is my concern because I'm pregnant and due April 12th, so that will basically cover my entire maternity leave of dust, noise. I won't be able to go outside pretty much, which is a bummer in summer. As a soccer coach for Edina Soccer Club, I would concur with what he said about Alden Park. It's a highly parked area and very busy during the summer. I would also ask that parking is not taken away on Washington Avenue. It is fairly highly parked throughout the year, and with part of my driveway being taken away, then there would be less parking in general in my driveway as well as on the street. Going hand in hand with that, they mentioned that parking reduces speed with the proposed bike lane being added in there. As you heard, 40 miles an hour average with the 25 mile an hour speed limit. That's kind of a concern. If the city could do anything about speed on that road, that would be great. Lastly, we're right by UNFI on that street. They have a lot of semi-trucks that constantly go down that road, even though there's a tiny sign asking them not to. I'm assuming that that leads to a lot of damage on the road over time. I don't know if there's anything the city can do about that, but constantly there's semi-trucks going down that road. Thank you.
What were your thoughts on the shared pathway?
There's people walking there, not much because of the speed on the road. Whenever we walk on there, we try to get off of the street immediately. The only part of that area that is highly walked is trying to get to the dog park, but they said that won't be addressed for a long time. So, yeah.
Thanks for your thoughts.
Hi, my name is Rhonda Krolak. I live at 404 Adams Avenue South, and I'm here to read a letter from my neighbor who couldn't make it tonight. That's Mary Martinez, who is at 406 Adams Avenue. It is my request that this letter be read into the council minutes. It would seem that the city of Edina cannot leave well enough alone. West Minneapolis Heights is besieged periodically by real estate salespeople who would like to displace us all so they can make money, and now we are subject to street renewal and for Adams, Madison, and Jefferson paved alleys. I'm not familiar with the situation on Madison or Jefferson, but I'm reasonably sure that no one on Adams has requested that our alley be paved, bituminous or otherwise. I have lived in my property since June 1972, and in all that time, the clay alley has served its purpose with only an occasional request for some small areas to be filled in. If the goal is to be environmentally friendly, the clay surface is clearly a better option, as water will and does seep down through the clay and does not engender excess runoff. A bituminous surface will create a coal-based runoff and be much more slippery in the winter months. It is my understanding that we are trying to use fewer fossil-based products where possible. I understand the need for repaving the area streets, but it would seem that the engineering staff has had dreams of glory far beyond what is necessary or reasonable. Therefore, I object to paving the alley between Washington and Adams and the unnecessary widening of Belmore, Washington, and Monroe.
Thank you, Ms. Kolak. Did you have anything you wanted to add for yourself?
And we would take a copy of that letter if
Yeah,
you
I do.
will.
Yeah, we can take that letter and put it in the record, too.
Oh.
As pertains to your own property at 404 Adams, anything you wanted to share with us?
No, my most main concern has been about taxes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Evening.
Good evening. I'm Joe Esterly. I live on 323 Adams Avenue, right on the corner of Adams and Belmore. So I do share with my 323 neighbor here. I fully support the upgrade to the roads, curb system, sewage, water lines. Those are all fantastic. I know it's an old neighborhood. My children frequently play on both Adams and Belmore. My concerns lie in the sidewalk project. One, just in the lack of statistics in terms of safety. I don't find a lot of comfort in it should slow down traffic as a good response for adding in a sidewalk or assessing 8 feet of my property. As I'm familiar with paying for that property, I'm now being charged to have it taken away, only to now add to my work in the wintertime to shovel that. Part of the other concern, and this was also brought up by both of my children who are now 6 and 9, is that they asked me, will this sidewalk bring people closer to the house where they play in the neighborhood and in my backyard? My answer is yes. I have no control over that. Right now, there's a fair buffer between the street and my home, and a lot of the neighbors on Belmore, on our side of the street, have homes that are closer to the road. So by adding in or removing parts of our lot, we now bring more foot traffic to the doors. So other concerns I have, not only for the safety of the kids and bringing traffic towards the houses, but also my remaining tree that is on my property on the corner is the only thing that provides shade in the summertime. My energy bills will increase, and I don't think that that was factored in as a position in terms of this upgrade. Also, the irrigation for the new sod and the disruption that I now have to maintain in addition to the energy bills is also something I have to pay for, as water is something that's assessed on myself. Let me see here. I made some notes. It was my first meeting. I thought it'd be more of a Q&A, less of a say it and have you all look at me, so forgive me. Let's see. I wrote quickly. I apologize.
Oh, take your time, Joe.
So
What was it you were worried about relative to the tree? Was it that you fear that it might be removed to accommodate the sidewalk?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, the pictures and the demonstrations or illustrations, forgive me, weren't very clear as to what exactly was going to happen with my property, and those questions still haven't necessarily been answered. But my concern is I had several ash trees that were covering our property, which were fantastic, and then they had emerald ash borer, and we had to cut them down. I have one remaining tree that provides shade on the south side of my property, which gets beaten with sun. And that's the one thing that helps reduce some of my energy costs. Being in the HVAC business, I also assess energy costs and consumption as a profession. And so I am acutely aware of what happens when a house is beaten by sun versus when it's shaded. That is an economic impact that I'm going to have to now consider as a result of this. There were comments made about increasing property values. I don't know about anybody here. I can tell you I have never looked at a house based on its curb appeal. Yes. Does the front door look nice? Is it painted well? Is it a new roof? But I have not looked at whether the literal curb or the sidewalk condition or the fact that it has one in determining where I should or should not live. And I would be very curious as to what independent firm was used in terms of assessing that and what went into that assessment to say that my property value will increase by between $9,000 or $12,000. Did you have another part to that?
Yeah, no, I think it's time to wrap up.
Oh, shoot. I apologize.
Yeah.
Forgive me. Anyways, in closing, thank you for letting us come here
Sure,
today. I
absolutely.
appreciate the questions asked by the both of you because it was very clarifying to me. I think, in conclusion, more data does need to be provided to this council as well as our residents in order to have any kind of good feeling about this project moving forward in terms of the sidewalk being proposed. I have not heard clear or concise information about what it's for, who it's for, or why it's actually happening, as most of those questions were answered with, I'm not quite sure. We've heard different data.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Other folks, there's a good chance for you. I mean, we're going to, you'll be able to submit written information to supplement any oral testimony, or if you don't feel comfortable getting up and speaking to the council about your concerns, you'll have until noon on December 11th to submit something in writing as well. So keep that in mind too. Welcome.
Hey, thanks. My name's John Nightingale. I live on 306 Monroe. I just want to kind of echo a neighbor I wasn't aware of that, but the neighbors I have talked to on 306 Monroe, or on Monroe, just are not in favor of the mixed-use bike path to reduce our street size. And I'm somewhat, I work from home since COVID, so I'm kind of the nosy neighbor. I was looking out my window at my office, seeing, and bike traffic and walking traffic on Monroe is negligible. Remember, we have winters here when there would be used even less. So I would just say that it's probably not a good use of funds. I do know that I'm not sure about the logic of narrowing the streets, just that there may be calming traffic, but you forget that now everyone gets everything delivered. So now there's so many more delivery vehicles on the roads I see every day, Amazon and UPS and that sort of thing. But I just wanted to echo that the neighbors I hadn't talked to that neighbor, I don't know him, but the ones I had to were just not in favor of the bike path on Monroe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nightingale. Anyone else?
Council.
Good evening.
I'm Thomas Wendell. I live at 302 Monroe Ave South. Broken record.
Thomas, what street were you on?
302 Monroe Ave.
Thank you.
Monroe Avenue.
Thank you.
Probably just a broken record. I like what I'm hearing about the improvement of infrastructure and the road. That's all good and dandy. Not not very thrilled about the reduction in width of the road and the reduction in parking. As stated before, at the local park, when there's games and stuff, it is basically a one-way street because people park on both sides. It's going to just get even more chaotic. Not a big fan of the widths of the cars shown in the proposed images. Most cars nowadays are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They're going to take up more space. Roads are going to get more narrow. It's going to be kind of a pain. I'm losing parking on my side of the street in front of my house, so when my elderly parents visit, especially in winter, they're now going to have to cross an icy street. My stepfather is disabled, can't get around very well, so it's going to make it even more unsafe and difficult for him to visit my house. And then I don't know if you guys recall, but when there was all the construction for the light rail at 169 in Excelsior, the main detour was 3rd Street. And so by narrowing that road even more, when a car parks on it, 2 cars are not going to really be able to get by each other on that road. It's a main connection. And then it's still unclear. The proposers mentioned they would reach out to people with those unique driveways that are like an alley, but it's to one garage. I have one of those, and it's not paved, it's gravel. So what I'm hearing is they're going to backfill with sod, but I'd like to know what material options I'd have to backfill my driveway that connects to 3rd Street or if they extend it by 6 feet. But yeah, yet again, like the improvements to the road, improvements to infrastructure, all for that, but not a big fan of the sidewalk on Monroe or the reduction in road width. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Thomas. Anyone else wish to speak to the council? Okay, do we have anybody online that wishes to speak to us? All right. Director Milner is getting ready to answer some of these questions. I don't know if you wanted to have us close the public hearing for in-person testimony and then take questions, which is our usual practice.
That is your usual practice,
Yeah.
so there, I think if you want to do
So I think, folks, one last chance. Anybody else want to testify? Yeah. Yeah, come on up. You haven't been up before, have you? No, come on up.
Nick Wimmer, 415 Van Buren is where I live. So I'll not reiterate what others have also said about the love of the infrastructure and everything. But I wanted to ask specifically on Van Buren, they're not planning sidewalks, so they're planning on narrowing the streets. And I'm an avid runner, biker on the streets, and I've never had an issue with the traffic whatsoever. And I wanted to ask specifically, so the implications of the cost, if we were to just repave the streets as is, 30 feet wide, which is what Van Buren and others are, versus narrowing them to 27 and then restoring the right-of-way, what would be the change in cost there to repave the streets as is, rather than doing the living streets plan?
Can we get your name too?
Yep.
Nick Wimmer.
Say the mic.
Nick Wimmer.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And your address on Van Buren?
415.
415? Okay, thanks. All right. Anyone else? Want to come forward? All right. Staff's recommending that we close the in-person public hearing this evening and keep the online public input open until noon on December 11th, and then continue the action item to the December 17th City Council meeting. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Member Agnew moves.
Second.
Member Jackson seconds the motion as stated, which would be to close the in-person public hearing this evening and keep the online public input open until noon on December 11th, And continue the action on the item to the December 17th City Council meeting and discussion comment. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering if we can extend the time period when people can write online. I realize that we need to get information in the packet, but I also realize this gives people less than 48 hours to provide feedback. And I'm wondering if in the packet you could capture the material that was turned in by noon on Wednesday, but just put a note saying that it will remain open and it will be on us to look at better together and see if there are additional comments, so it can at least get one day of the weekend available for people to comment.
Well, I'll add one note. The letter went out, how long ago? 10 days ago. So people already knew the website was open 10 days ago. We've received a few comments on there. We can collect feedback on Wednesday afternoon and put it in the packet. And then we could bring to the meeting, I could just bring it, here's what we heard between Wednesday and the council meeting next Tuesday, or, Tuesday AM. I could pull that report. So we can pull the weekend data. It's not officially a public hearing at that point because you're going to close it tonight. So it's just more feedback. And we could just bring those comments back.
I would appreciate that.
We won't have them in the packet, though, so no one's going to be able to see those information between Wednesday and the council meeting on Tuesday.
Right, but it would give us more opportunity to get feedback from people, and there could be people watching or, finding out about it. And I mean, it's only, it's like 40-something hours remaining from
we could
right
do that.
now.
Just
Okay.
won't have it in the packet, which has been requested of council members to have everything in the packet. So,
well, I don't know how my colleagues feel.
It's a fair inquiry. I was wondering too about the short timeline here. It seems to me that in the past we've even had it open until like Sunday noon.
we've always done Wednesday, 2 days later. Since COVID, right? This is our third or fourth year with COVID, and we've always done it 2 days later because we have the deadlines for the packet for the next
Even if we
week.
left it open until the 13th.
Yep.
End of business on the
I looked
13th.
to our city clerk. She typically publishes the packet Friday, so there's maybe an opportunity to try to get everything Thursday afternoon in there.
Yes, we could potentially make that work. Publishing the packet is noon on Friday. Looking at the calendar, the 13th.
Yep, the 13th.
So we could pull everything Thursday afternoon. That gives another day.
If we went till noon on the 13th, that would give people a couple extra days or a day and a half.
On Thursday, because it's got to be published by Friday at noon. We got to get that information to Sharon to get it published. And then we could still keep it open on the weekend and bring you the feedback, and you guys can see that stuff.
Well, if I can jump in, as Member Risser said, the hearing comments are public for anybody to see. Any one of members, mayor and members of the council could see them on Friday and Saturday and even Sunday as well. So we could share the link with where those public hearing comments are if you want to see them as they come in too.
Yep.
I like that. That's a brilliant idea. Just include the link in the documentation. That's perfect.
So what's the notion? Leave the motion as it's stated and still let people submit?
Close the in-person public hearing tonight.
Yeah.
And then public testimony will continue till the next council meeting, and we'll pull a report on Thursday afternoon for the packet.
Are the maker and the seconder comfortable with that?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to close the in-person public hearing this evening and keep the online public input open until the council meeting on December 17th.
Yep, and you can watch those comments come in.
All right, very good. And they're comfortable with that, maker, seconder?
Yes.
Okay. Consider that revised. And any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Motion's approved. And now let's go to questions. And Director Milner, you are ready to go there, I think.
Yeah, you want me to run through, or you want to step through them, Mayor?
Yeah, I'm just going to start here at the beginning. So Mr. Hill, who was at 323 Monroe, I think he was at the corner of Monroe and Belmore, was concerned about parking on Belmore if we limit it to one side only. reduce the street width, that there's already parking issues related to events at the park. And, we'd be just compounding our problems if we allow people to park on one side of the street. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So looking at the map, here's the property. So sidewalk on Monroe. I think we want to clarify that. There was some comments that was a shared use path, but Monroe is a sidewalk, and we'll show you that typical section. The shared use path would be Belmore. And then we can show you the typical section on Monroe is a 5-foot sidewalk with a boulevard and 1 parking lane. So that is correct. We would reduce the parking. And then on Belmore would be the shared use path with one-sided parking. So there would be a reduction in parking and people would have to walk further, but now they have sidewalks and a shared use path to walk and not have to walk in the street in traffic to get to the park if they park on Monroe or Belmore. So there will be a reduction in parking on those 2 streets.
All right, let us, we'll all ponder that. And then Nancy Hart over in Madison she was requesting a clarification on the math, on the RU, I think, calculation.
Yeah, it was the width numbers, right? So on this graphic was from curb to curb today is 30 feet. And if we continue with the shared use path proposal, the street itself will be 24, then a 0 to 3 foot grass boulevard. So if we assume the widest, 3 feet, and then the 8-foot trail, that's 11. So it'd be 35 feet total width from the curb on the south to the edge of the trail on the north. So it's actually 5 feet wider than what's there today. So yeah, the math here is just curb to curb, but with the trail in there, it's going to be wider.
Public hearing is closed, I'm sorry.
Reduction in...
That might not have been her question. So... Okay, that's a good question that we didn't.
So we have 60 feet of right-of-way. We would reach out to owners to see if they have built stuff in the right-of-way or not, and how can we accommodate. Maybe we go down to a 0-foot grass boulevard, and we can protect the fence, or maybe we have to adjust the fence for the owner. So we would reach out when we get into design on trees, fences, landscaping, retaining walls, like we do with all of our projects. Reach out to the owners and try to do a best fit for the project.
Marcia, I think it was Esterling over at Washington Avenue, said the timing wasn't so great for her because she's pregnant and she's going to deliver and has a maternity leave period of time. Now, I don't think we've had people in a situation where they're housebound before, unless they voluntarily want to be housebound. Would you want to comment on that? That she was worried about she wouldn't be able to go outside.
It'll be dusty, dirty, noisy. We're not going to lie about that. They'll have access to the driveways every day, except for a couple of days when we pour concrete. And if she needs vehicle access during those days, we can sometimes pour those aprons half at a time. It's not a whole summer on one street. It's typically 8 to 12 weeks per street. So it's not going to be 4 months, 5 months of construction right in front of our house. It's going to be, the neighborhood's going to be phased in sections of the neighborhood. We really have to make the water main work in the neighborhood. So there's going to be issues. There's going to be some of the, 2 to 3 months, but not a full summer of 5+ months in one area.
Okay.
And she will have access.
Bragnew.
So my own experience, maternity leave is sometimes 8-ish to 12 weeks. How much leeway do we have in the order of streets that we take this on within that neighborhood?
We really let the contractor decide for the most part, but this is a unique neighborhood in that we have the water treatment facility. So there might be areas that we have to do first or second. So I think Aaron has spoke with Public Works on that, if you got more details.
Yes, the first portion of the project will be to replace the 12-inch water main that's on Belmore and Jackson as it goes south to Maloney Avenue. So I would anticipate that being phase 1. But generally, we don't tell the contractor which streets to start on. We generally leave it up to them because there's a lot of efficiency in their bidding. And if we dictate start here or there, and it might be more inefficient from them, and raise costs on the project potentially.
Yeah, I was just thinking though, because I think she was specifically on Washington, which is an edge street. So if there is any flexibility, maybe that could be a solution there to.
Or at least give her some advance notice, you know.
Yeah.
For sure, and we've worked with people that have medical deliveries, oxygen delivery, you know,
Sure.
we work with all of that. She mentioned semi-trucks. We designed the road to handle the trucks. We know there's more trucks on Washington because of the industrial.
Even though they're not supposed to be there.
It's a public street. We cannot, you can't tell them not to go there. There's suggestions, but they can use our streets. So we designed for those trucks. And then there was comments about, I don't see anybody.
Councilmember Jackson wants to.
Yeah.
Yes,
comment
thank you.
here.
So when we talked about specifically the bike lanes on Washington, with the semis that aren't supposed to be there but are there, to me, having what is your input on the safety then of the bike lane on the street versus the shared use? What's the bigger risk?
Yeah. You heard it from Chair Lewis earlier and from Andrew, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion, the bikers that are on the street are the top 10 to 20%. And they're going to ride in the street no matter what's around. You see them ripping around all over the place, right? We're trying to design facilities for that other 60 to 80% of people that are interested but too concerned to bike in the street. That's why we want to create a wider facility of a shared use so people mix. In my opinion, the risk of getting hit by a car is way greater. I mean, that's not even my opinion. That's the fact. Than if you're on a sidewalk where a bike and a pedestrian would happen to interact. The risk of getting hit by a car going 30 plus of death is a big number, the percentages. So I would prefer to keep the interested and families off the street and have a wider facility off the street.
Which would allow parking on the street.
Which would also allow parking. That's why we kind of came up with that balanced solution. The three of us, which differs from the ETC, but we felt it was important to hear from the commission this evening too.
Well, and I'm thinking too about even greater risk with semis.
Oh yeah, yeah, the weight.
And that's, so
Greater risk.
if with cars, we've got the analysis of safety,
Yes.
but when you've got semis going that can't stop as easily as a car can. So, Mr. Scipione, you look like you have an answer too.
No, Director Milner, I think, hit the nail on the head. I would agree. I mean, from an equity standpoint, again, depending on what kind of user we're trying to design for, if we're trying to, again, focus on those most vulnerable road users, that off-street shared use path is the safest, most comfortable facility. There are still going to be users who bike in the street who choose to and are more comfortable there, and that's a risk that they're willing to take.
Yep, and then she also had a comment about, I don't see anybody walking today. Well, because we design sidewalks and facilities like this for future users because it's not safe to walk in the facilities. They don't feel comfortable walking there today. So we typically see a major increase in the walkers after you put in these off-street sidewalks or shared use paths.
So,
Go ahead, you had a follow-up.
yeah, follow up on Washington. Are the driveways into the alleyway or onto the street or both?
Street.
There's some of both.
Okay.
I believe on the southern end of the street, generally the driveways are on Washington, and then as you get to the north, the driveways access the alley between Washington and Adams.
We can get you numbers of how many for next time.
Yeah, because if we're looking at deliveries, you know, and there's no parking, I'm concerned about that, so.
Yep, we can get you the exact number.
Okay,
of
thank you.
Driveways.
On the semi issue, if all we have is a bully pulpit to use on that issue, and I get it, super value's right over there, but we had this problem on 70th Street with respect to Super Target, and we got a hold of Target and told them, tell your transport people to stay off 70th Street, go on the crosstown down to Xerxes, and then come in on Xerxes, and then it changes into York.
Sure.
We don't see semis on 70th very often. Somebody makes a mistake, but it really would be something that we should try to think about from a strategy standpoint, even if it's a bully pulpit, to try to get Super Value to get their transporters to change their habits.
Okay.
So, all right. Rhonda Krolak provided some information for us from her neighbor at 406 Adams Avenue, who said no one requested the alleyway be improved. that the clay surface is still a better option. So I don't know if you want to provide us with your thoughts on that from a staff standpoint.
Yeah, we disagree. We've been trying to get rid of all the gravel alleys in town because it has erosion that ends up in the storm sewer. It's sediment in there that ends up in the creeks, and it silts up creeks and streams and ends up downstream. So it's added maintenance for our guys to continue to add gravel to those facilities. We're pushing gravel in their yards, and people got to clean it up when our snowplows go through those alleys. So we feel it's just paving it is a better all-around facility from an erosion and a maintenance standpoint.
Just to go back over to Washington for a moment on that shared use pathway. It was recommended then by staff that the residents along Washington maintain that shared use pathway?
Correct.
Or are we going to maintain it?
No, it would be resident maintained for all these facilities within the neighborhood. I think Aaron wanted to add a little bit on the gravel alley.
I would just add too that watershed districts and pollution control agency, who we do our permitting from, they consider gravel alleys an impervious surface, the same as asphalt. Now, can some of it technically infiltrate into the gravel alley? Sure, potentially, but generally it's considered an impervious surface.
Member Agnew.
The resident referred to this driveway as a clay driveway. What's the difference between clay and gravel?
Good question, Mary. I would think it's a gravel alley. There might be some clay underneath the gravel base, but generally it's a gravel alley.
And can you confirm that it is city maintained?
Yes.
Even from a snow removal perspective?
It is. It's maintained.
So here's a picture. Oh, if we can bring back the screen. Here's a picture of that alley. So it has a lightish color, which people sometimes associate with clay, but we've been putting reclaim and gravel on that facility and plowing it. So,
and as Chad mentioned, when some of that gravel erodes, it may look like a clay alley, but it's generally supposed to be a gravel alley.
Yep.
So when we fill it in, we fill it with gravel and not
exactly.
clay. Okay, thank you.
Joe Esterling had some concerns that was at, I think it was 323 Adams. Adams and Belmore.
Yep.
Yeah, concerns. He is concerned about the sidewalk. He doesn't want to have to maintain the sidewalk. Traffic closer to the house, foot traffic. Worried about the tree closer to Belmore. What will happen to the property with the sidewalk relative to the sidewalk and the tree, I think is kind of the main thrust of his concerns.
Yep, I looked up his property. There were 4 trees. Sounds like 3 are maybe gone, so we'd have to figure out which trees left. If ash trees were taken out, but people with this section on the thing will be closer to the house, so that's for sure. But now they'll be instead on the street on a shared use path.
I think if I can jump in, that was probably an old Google Street View. I think a couple of those trees have already been removed.
Yep,
yeah, there's just one.
So
I think one
we
ash
have to
tree
look
remains.
specifically at the one tree that's left and just see how it fits within this. If we can go down to a 0 boulevard and save the tree, then we'll work with them on that.
I think.
If we could get more clarification, I'm looking at the municipal state aid road map, and I'm also seeing, there's Blake Road, there's Interlaken, Maloney. Are these roads that already have sidewalks that the city is maintaining? And if so, how much of a stressor would it be to have that Washington Avenue 2-block area be added to the sidewalk clearing program?
Yep, this goes back to the previous discussion. We had a recent work session. We shared the practice of we maintain state aid routes, which on here is Maloney and Blake. All the rest are local streets. We don't maintain sidewalks on local streets. We do them adjacent to parks, and we do them safe routes to schools. So in this neighborhood, nothing meets that criteria, but council, as has happened a few times in the past, just directed staff to figure it out and maintain it. But if we keep doing that, we're going to be short-staffed, short on equipment, and eventually it's going to lead to budget requests for more staffing and sidewalk machines.
Are there any other 8-foot wide sidewalks in Edina that residents are responsible for clearing? Or is this precedent setting?
Maybe I'll look, Andrew. If we can find that for you quickly, we can. We don't expect 8-foot plowed. We expect 5-foot plowed in the winter. That's the biggest thing, to maintain it like it is a 5-foot sidewalk, because there's very few cyclists in the wintertime on that facility. So similar to when our plows are 5 feet, so we go through, we're only going to maintain 5 feet, even if we do these or state aid. So our expectation is 5 feet in the wintertime, just like a 5-foot sidewalk.
Do we maintain, from a city standpoint, anything over at the park?
We do. What you see on the graphic, we maintain through the park. Yep. So there is a park truck that goes through there and maintains that trail.
To answer your question, the only shared use path we have right now that is privately maintained is a shared use path adjacent to the Fred Apartments that connects 77th Street to Fred Richards Park.
Yep.
Just given the amount of traffic, the use of the road by semis and all of that, it seems like if there is a way that the city could maintain that sidewalk, it would be in the best interests of not just the residents who are there, but for people who are using that pathway.
And we could bring back more feedback at the next council meeting. Talk to Public Works Director. I don't want to make that promise tonight.
Yeah.
If council directs us to do it, for sure, but I'd like to talk to Brian, Mr. Olson first.
It's very reminiscent of the Concord conversation.
Very similar. So there's a few other questions.
Remember, Jackson has a question for you before you jump on to other questions.
Staying with Mr. Esterling, he also asked about what's in the assessment, and then it's my understanding that this is something that's been used, the way we do assessment that adds value to the property, that's something that's been done for a long time, and there's a lot of data around that. Can you talk a little bit more in depth about that process?
Yes, we hire an appraiser that does a market benefit review. And the market says when streets are new, curbs and gutter are new, that there's more of a market benefit, that property values increase. So this individual does metro area assessments statewide. He helped us in court cases, so he's a very reputable appraiser. And we gave you those rough numbers that he put together for a potential benefit to these properties after the project. And Aaron has some follow-up.
If I can jump in. So that preliminary market benefit report is available on the President's A and B Better Together website. And I think another question was who did it. It was Nagel Appraisal Incorporated. So that's available for viewing.
And we heard our city assessor speak to budgets and things at the last council meeting. So that's not an instantaneous increase in property values. It's based on property sales within the areas that they do their appraisals on as a city too. So it's over time.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
If I may, I also just wanted to add that the costs of the sidewalks and the shared use paths are not in the assessment, and those are paid separately by the Pedestrian and Cyclist Safety Fund.
Good, thank you
some
for
questions
that.
about that too. Yep.
So back to Member Risser's point, tell us what we're maintaining in that general neighborhood from a public standpoint for sidewalks.
We're doing Maloney. We're doing this little shared use or the sidewalk trail through the park, and we're doing Blake Road. Did I miss anything, Andrew?
Nope.
Okay, that's helpful.
Hopkins is maintaining the existing shared use path on 3rd Street and 2nd Street.
So Hopkins has their own maintenance operations on their side. So the north side of 2nd Street, Hopkins does, and the north side of 3rd Street, Hopkins. Sounds like they maintain those.
So they take care of that existing shared use pathway on the north side of 3rd.
Correct.
Okay. So we're, do you know what the strategy is now in terms of just sort of the operational aspect of it? Somebody goes over there with a piece of equipment. They do Blake Road, they do Maloney, and now it's possible they could just go up Washington and come back across on Belmore because they got to go to the park anyway. I mean,
I'll speak to Ms. Director Olson. Every block we add adds time, and over time we're going to go down from 2 days of service to 3 days of service to 4 until we add more staff and machines. So we can keep adding it. It's just going to be a level of service is going to just decrease. We've been adding sidewalks for the last 10 years and added one person, I think, in one piece of
I think
machinery.
we understand this well from the conversation in Concord, but decided that we would have it publicly maintained. So why don't you talk to the Public Works Director about what he sees in terms of incremental cost or incremental time involved in just continuing that loop.
Yeah, and Aaron's got to follow up.
Minor point, but just semantics. The Public Works maintains the sidewalk on Maloney Avenue, but actually the Parks Department would maintain the snow in Alden Park. So two different sets of crews that are maintaining.
It's a good point. Anything in the parks, our parks guys take smaller vehicles, pickups, and just do that, where our street guys do all the street stuff. So that's a good point.
Yeah, fair point. A couple of folks, Mr. Nightingale and Thomas Wendell, were concerned about this. They didn't favor street shrinkage, and that's not the first time we've heard that. I mean, if you go over in Wooddale, people are parking on one side, and if there's cars that are trying to get past each other, somebody has to wait a little bit. We just had this same conversation down on Concord, where we went to a 27-foot wide street from a 30-foot wide street. And why don't you walk through the reasons we do that again?
We think it's a great idea when people have to wait, because the biggest request we get from a traffic safety standpoint is cars are going too fast, they're not slowing down. So when there's cars parked on one side, two cars are coming, you do have to wait. Delivery trucks have to wait, garbage trucks, and that's a good thing from a traffic safety, a personal safety standpoint. So we think that's good. Reducing the street width is less stormwater we got to manage to meet the watershed permits that Aaron brought up. It's less cost to the residents. Somebody asked what those cost implications are, and I'll see if Aaron has a rough percentage now, or we got to bring that back later. So there's a cost of the current construction, but then cost of maintenance moving forward. It's much more expensive to maintain a street than it is grass boulevard areas.
Yeah. Member Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I definitely agree on those aspects. I had like two notes that I thought were for me, that were high priority. In that context, I felt like it was the use of the park and where people would be able to park in peak times. And so you can't really, that doesn't necessarily stand out on this view, but I think it would be prudent upon us to really look at peak parking, where that's going to overflow into the rest of the neighborhood. And honestly, if we look at that and we think there's an issue from whether it be safety or ease of use of the park, I kind of think that would be a good reason to look at altering that, our plan. But we definitely need to look at the data from a peak perspective. And then, Mayor, you covered my other one.
You're talking about Belmore now.
I'm talking about Belmore, yeah.
Thank you for that.
And then you covered my other one for the truck traffic. Anytime that we can go advocate for our residents, especially to a commercial establishment, I just think it's smart to do that. They're having them outline, this is the truck path you should use. Just having those conversations to me is wise, although we have very little control over that. And since I have the mic, I'm going to hit my third one. We talked about earlier, I think it was Marcia, I had a request there. I think oftentimes we think about these projects and we have the timeline associated with it. But I always feel like it's an upheaval of the neighborhood for the duration of the project. So I still think about driving over the Concord, and there are a few weeks over there where you couldn't even drive down because everything was ripped up. But that's not necessarily the case for the duration of the project. So I think it would be good if we could articulate what an expectation could be week by week for the duration of the project. to allow people to at least start to plan for things. And I know the timing shifts as there are delays and things like that. But I think if we can do that, that will at least allow people time to think through and kind of plan as best as they can.
Would you find that slide on Monroe? We had a few folks that were concerned about having a sidewalk on Monroe. And I think the inferential point was that, wait a minute, you got a sidewalk on Monroe from, I think it was all the way from 3rd down to Maloney. Yeah.
Yep.
And, none of these other north-south streets have sidewalks. Why Monroe? First threshold question, why Monroe?
Thanks for the question, Mayor. So Monroe is one of the few streets in this neighborhood that extends all the way up to Excelsior Boulevard. The other ones in the neighborhood, I believe, are Van Buren and Harrison. Monroe, in the case of this neighborhood, it's right in the middle. Again, it's adjacent to both Alden Park and Harley Hopkins Park in St. Louis Park. It's adjacent to Harley Hopkins Family Center, in Hopkins, not St. Louis Park. And it also provides a direct connection to a Metro Transit stop it's technically between Monroe and Jackson on Excelsior Boulevard, but it's really the most direct path to that transit stop.
Okay. And then would you go back to that slide on Monroe and what configuration was recommended to be? Because I think others were concerned about, as you get Monroe, Belmore, they were concerned about, parking on.
Yep. So we typically narrow
on one side versus both sides like it is now.
Yep. So we typically take a 30-foot road, and if we do a sidewalk with 24 plus 10, we're at 34. So it's not a big change to what's out there today. So we could build a 27-foot street and have parking on both sides and still build a sidewalk. We're just going to impact people's, what they think is the front yard, but it's right-of-way, city right-of-way. We're going to impact that more. So we typically try to fit it down in the narrowest footprint, and we've found that going down the one-sided parking is not a problem on most streets. It's just not needed. In this case, maybe there's a difference where we should still do a 27-foot street and the sidewalk on this case to address the parking. So that's something staff could look at and bring back next week.
Yeah, maybe you should do that. Take a look at that. And the residents that are here could opine on that too.
The potential impacts, we could take a quick review.
Yeah, if there was, so what you're saying is you could go to 27 feet and have a sidewalk or have no sidewalk?
Well, we'd still recommend a sidewalk. Yep. Now do we have room for a boulevard? We really like a boulevard. But maybe if we're going to 27 it's all trade-offs and balance. If we think we need two-sided parking, then maybe we go to the 6 foot right on the back of the curb, which we've done on some.
You'd eliminate that 5-foot boulevard and go to the back of the bulkhead like we've.
Not necessarily.
There might be space for it, so that's what I think we're going to look at.
So some examples where we've done 28-foot streets or 27-foot streets with a sidewalk are in the Gulf Terrace neighborhood from 2016, I believe. West Woodland Road, Tower Street, 56th Street. Those are all constructed with two-sided parking and a sidewalk.
Okay. Yes, Member Risser.
Okay, I just had a thought looking at Google Maps and the image of Washington Avenue. And it's making me think about how if we put the sidewalk on the, okay, now I have my directions all messed up, but, okay, thank you, Carolyn. It's this chemo fog that stays with me. On the east side, we're running the sidewalk over driveways, and we have the, breaking that up. And would it be safer to put it on the opposite side of the street so you would have this unbroken path next to the fencing?
In one way, yes. In the other way, you're making all of those users now cross Washington, which as we said before, has high traffic volumes, high speeds. So we feel it's safer to keep those users from having to cross Washington.
And cross a driveway with very low numbers and very, very slow speeds compared to 40 miles an hour on Washington. So there's trade-offs.
Yeah, but we've got a lot of sidewalk systems in our neighborhoods that cross driveways.
Correct.
Most of them. Ragnar.
Thank you. So we did, and I see you just pulled up the survey results. We had gotten the question about some of this, but I think before we even get into this, I want to understand, I had read there was a 15% response rate. Is that typical? Do we usually see better response? And how should I think about only 15% of the residents responding to the survey?
Good question, Mayor. In full disclosure, we had a questionnaire that was out there, and we closed it, and the original percentage was 15%. We did open that questionnaire back up, and we did get some additional feedback. What you see on the screen there is the additional feedback. So I think when we factored in the second version, I think it was 23% responded. It's still a little bit lower than we typically get. We typically get somewhere around 40%. So it's still lower than we'd like to receive. Which, if I could segue in, I mean, a big part of doing these questionnaires, it gets us a feeling of what's happening in the neighborhood. I think one of the questions was about parking on the street. If I can read it from here, I think 74% reported parking less than once per month. That doesn't account for visitors parking, of course, and that's the percentage that submitted the survey. It's not done on a street-by-street basis, so Monroe could be different than Van Buren, et cetera. But this is the data we have when we're making some of these suggestions too. So to us, it doesn't seem like parking on the street is a major factor.
And all the results are in your packet, all the survey results.
Yeah, so this caused me to harken back to Mr. Hill's observation. I think he said 82% of the neighbors didn't want sidewalks. And why we think about having a sidewalk system in our community, which sometimes seems like you're putting a sidewalk in an area where it doesn't connect to anything yet. But here you got that clear, on Monroe, that clear connection between 3rd and Excelsior Boulevard and things beyond and Maloney. What is the reason that we think we want to have this sidewalk system in our city?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Mayor. So hearkening back again to the Ped and Bike Master Plan and our comprehensive plan, the city is really strategically trying to encourage people to not use single occupancy vehicles, to use other modes of transportation, both to get around and for recreation. So the best way to do that is to provide the infrastructure where people feel safe to walk, to roll, to bike, to take transit. As you mentioned, these facilities connect to a number of other facilities in the area, local amenities. Belmore is maybe the only exception as it dead ends within the project limits, but if it is approved, we would consider extending it out to Blake so that it all in all forms a continuous comprehensive network.
Just thinking about days gone by where it seems like we have a lot of people now that want the sidewalks. There was a period of time when not many people wanted sidewalks, and they've come to rely on this sidewalk network, especially younger families. I was thinking of over on Maple Road next to 50th and France years ago. They didn't want sidewalks, but the people that didn't want sidewalks were people my age they were going somewhere for the winter, didn't want to have to maintain it. But since then, it just, when you separate people from traffic, you're inherently keeping them safer, and people use it once it's built. So when you do build it, they do come and they do use it.
And
I think that's something to think about too.
Apologies. As we mentioned about bikers on Washington, there are going to be a percentage of riders, whether you provide an off-street facility or not, that are going to continue to ride in the street because that's where they feel most comfortable. The same applies to pedestrians. There's certainly going to be, and we've seen it, there's certainly pedestrians, even when there's a sidewalk, who choose to be on the street just for their own personal preference. But there are generally other users who are not comfortable walking in the street, and so providing that facility for them really improves the overall equity of our transportation system.
And we used to assess for sidewalks. That was a big issue that residents were assessed for. We don't do that anymore. This is paid out of a separate fund. I think that's a key thing to keep reminding people that you're not paying for the sidewalks or the shared use paths in this project.
It caused you to Have a comment or a question, Member Jackson?
Well, I just keep thinking about the cars on Belmore when there's a soccer game going on. They're significant. So when you come back, if you could show where the parking facility at Alden Park is, that would be helpful too, to just get a sense of, because I remember going over there and just not even be able to move around. There were so many cars. And I think about the kids having to walk in the middle of the street to get to the field. But if you could let us know what the parking lot there is, that'd be helpful.
We'll look at Monroe and Belmore's sections around the park.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, to be clear, Alden Park doesn't have a surface lot. It relies strictly on on-street parking.
Yeah, didn't look like it, did it? Ms. Hart's, Nancy Hart's comment from the audience about her fence. I mean, this is something we didn't talk about, but these are things that we encounter as we do these projects. Yes. Is that people have pet containment situations or irrigation systems or landscaping in the right-of-way, fencing in the right-of-way. Those are issues that we help those folks deal with.
Yes, we repair those systems, and sometimes when they build fences way too close to the street in the right-of-way, that's not allowed by city code. So then we work with them on moving them back and trying to find that balance of where it should go with the project. So we would work with those individuals once we identify all those landscaping or fences or trees. But irrigation systems, we for sure fix all those, and pet containment system, those get fixed too.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Member Agnew,
I think it's the last one.
A lot of questions here. That's good.
So humor me on this. If we were to, in any of these situations, remove the sidewalk or the shared use path facility, would that have any impact on the overall assessment to residents?
No, not in my opinion. If we kept, the street width, if we got rid of the sidewalk on any street that's 24 feet wide, we would make it 27 now because there's no purpose. So now
that
you'd
would
have
increase.
two-sided park, so it would increase assessments.
Okay.
The how much is a question, right? Compared to all the other streets, those two that are highlighted, does that change it, or is that part of what's in the contingency that Aaron had mentioned earlier? We'd have to see on that piece.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, you got a couple of things to think about between now and the next meeting.
Yes.
Get back together again on the 17th. And folks, if you want to submit anything, you've now got until right up to the 17th to go ahead and submit something in writing to us if you want to opine further on some of these questions that have been raised, further thoughts for us to consider as we contemplate this project. So thanks for being here this evening. I really appreciate your participation. Thank you, staff. And I don't think there's any other business. We don't have a manager any longer to make any potential comments. Council comments, mayor comments. Anybody on council got anything you want to share? Yes.
I do have one because it's about street assessments. But, as we were talking through here, there were a couple of times it was mentioned mailings and door hangers, and that's the way that we communicate with residents throughout the life of the project. And I don't think it's necessarily something we could do for this one, but I would challenge staff to think about, are there other mechanisms, text message communication, or other things that residents could opt into, especially when we think about travel and all these other things that can still be potentially impactful, people getting those communications and staying in the loop on how things are going. So,
all right, good.
We do text during construction. People can sign up and get some feedback.
Love it. Thank you.
Because that's really where day-to-day operations change. And it's based on availability and how busy our inspectors are, but we try to use the text system and some of those more often.
Okay, good. Thanks. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second.
Jackson moves. Member Agnew seconds the adjournment of the meeting of the City Council this 9th day of December 2024 at 7:34 p.m. Any further discussion? Or 8:34 p.m., excuse me. Any other discussion? All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. We stand adjourned.